I paid for my grandson's medical school, but when I needed help, he put me in a nursing home. So I reminded him who made him important. If you're watching this, subscribe now and let me know where you're tuning in from. Some lessons can only be taught by those who've lived long enough to understand the true cost of forgetting. The day Michael graduated from medical school was the proudest of my life. I stood in the auditorium, my heart swelling as he crossed that stage in his cap and gown. Those watching just saw another young doctor receiving his diploma. They didn't see the mortgage papers I'd signed on my home. They didn't see the 30 years I'd spent raising him after his parents, my only daughter and her husband, died in that terrible crash on Route 9. "Grandma!" Michael rushed toward me after the ceremony, his face flushed with excitement. "I did it!" I cupped his face in my hands. "Your parents would be so proud of you." His eyes glistened. "I'm going to save people, Grandma. No one will die like Mom and Dad did, not when I can help it." We celebrated at Romano's, the little Italian place near our home in Lakeside. I still remember how he couldn't stop talking about his residency placement at Boston Memorial. "It's the best neurosurgical program in the state," he explained, gesturing with his fork. "After my residency, I'll do a fellowship and then you'll be the finest doctor Massachusetts has ever seen," I finished, raising my glass of wine. Michael's laugh filled the restaurant. "All because of you, Grandma. I couldn't have done any of this without you." I shook my head. "I just gave you a foundation. You built everything else. You gave up your retirement to raise me. You sold your dream house to move us closer to my school. You remortgaged your home to pay my tuition." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll never forget what you've done. When I'm established, I'm going to take care of you. You'll never want for anything." I believed him then. Why wouldn't I? He was my Michael, the frightened 7-year-old boy who'd crawled into my bed every night for a year after the accident, clutching his mother's photograph, the determined teenager who'd studied until dawn for his SATs, the compassionate young man who'd chosen medicine to honor his parents' memory. That night, I watched him sleep on my couch, too tall for it now, his feet dangling over the armrest. I thought about the sacrifices. The second job I'd taken to afford his college application fees, the retirement fund I'd drained for his undergraduate tuition. None of it felt like a sacrifice when I looked at him. "It was all worth it," I whispered to the darkened living room. I couldn't have known then how those words would haunt me 15 years later, when that same devoted grandson would stand in a hospital corridor, his voice cold as he discussed my future with his wife. "What are we going to do with her?" he'd ask, as if I were a broken appliance to be discarded. And his wife would reply, "That place near Westfield seems good, and it's far enough away." But on that graduation night, the betrayal still lay ahead, invisible as a tumor silently growing beneath the skin. The changes came so gradually, I barely noticed them. Like water wearing down stone, each small erosion seemed insignificant until the damage was done. During his residency, Michael still visited every other Sunday. He'd bring bagels and tell me about his cases, his eyes bright with the thrill of learning. When he started his fellowship, the visits became monthly, then sporadic. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he'd say over the phone. "The schedule is brutal. I'll make it up to you." I kept his favorite cookies in the freezer, thawing them whenever he called to say he was coming. Half the time, they'd go stale when he canceled at the last minute. Then came Vanessa. I met her at Michael's fellowship graduation dinner. Tall, elegant, with a dazzling smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Eleanor, Michael talks about you constantly." She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "Those stories about you raising him alone, so inspiring." "Just did what any grandmother would do," I replied, watching how she kept a manicured hand on Michael's arm, as if marking her territory. Later that night, I overheard them in the kitchen. "She's sharper than I expected," Vanessa said. "The way you described her, I thought she'd be more what?" Michael asked. "Dependent, I guess. You made it sound like she needed you." I slipped away before hearing his response. After they married, Michael's career accelerated. Chief resident, hospital board committees, medical journal publications. Each achievement pushed me further to the periphery of his life. Their housewarming party was my first glimpse of their new reality. A sprawling colonial in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, filled with Michael's colleagues and Vanessa's friends from her investment firm. "Eleanor, come meet Dr. Abernathy," Michael called, guiding me by the elbow. "She'll be fascinated by your perspective on how medicine has changed." Mom was a teacher for 40 years, he explained to his colleague. Mom, not Grandma, as if he'd rewritten our history to make it more palatable for his new circle. At dinner, I sat between a urologist and his wife, who asked polite questions about my teaching career before turning to more interesting guests. Across the table, Michael laughed at something Vanessa whispered, looking more like a stranger than the boy I'd raised. The final course was being served when Vanessa approached. Michael said you were feeling tired. I've called you a car service. But dessert hasn't. The driver's already waiting. Her smile was perfect, practiced. Michael sends his love. He's talking to Dr. Kaplan about a research opportunity and can't break away. I searched the room for my grandson, finding him deep in conversation. Unaware I was leaving, the driver helped me into the car, closing the door on the bright lights of the house, Michael's house, where I no longer belonged. As we pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text. Sorry you had to leave early. Let's have lunch next week. Love you. We didn't have lunch the next week, or the week after. When I called, his assistant answered. Dr. Whitman's schedule is completely full for the next month, but I'll tell him you called. Mrs. I'm sorry, who is this again? My hand trembled as I hung up the phone, the distance between us suddenly measurable in more than miles. Hello? You've reached Dr. Michael Whitman. I'm unavailable to take your call. I hung up, the automated greeting cutting off mid-sentence. It was the third time I'd called this week. 3 times I'd heard his recorded voice instead of the real thing. My left hand had been tingling all morning. Just a pinched nerve, probably. But when I dropped my coffee mug and couldn't grip the broom to sweep up the shards, a cold dread settled in my stomach. Just call him one more time, I told myself, dialing with clumsy fingers. Miraculously, he answered on the second ring. Grandma? I'm between surgeries. Is everything okay? His voice echoed in what sounded like a hallway. Michael, I'm having some strange symptoms. My left side feels weak, and I keep dropping things. Yesterday, I got confused about vovô, he interrupted, using the Portuguese endearment he hadn't used in years. You're 87. These things happen. Take some Tylenol and rest. I've got to go. They're prepping my next patient. But I'll call this weekend. Okay? Love you. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, the tingling in my hand spreading up my arm. That night, I struggled to sleep, positioned awkwardly to avoid pressing on my tingling arm. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text. For a moment, I thought Michael had remembered my concerns, but it was just an automated reminder about my upcoming dentist appointment. The next morning, I called Dr. Peterson, my primary care physician for 20 years. His receptionist squeezed me in that afternoon. Your blood pressure is quite elevated, Eleanor, he said, frowning at his notes. And these symptoms you're describing, have you told your grandson about this? Given his specialty, he might have insights. I nodded, unwilling to admit that Michael had brushed me off. I'd like to schedule some tests, Dr. Peterson continued. An MRI at minimum. With your family history, my daughter's aneurysm, I said quietly. The same condition that had killed her at 39, leaving Michael an orphan. As I left the clinic, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Grandma? Listen, Vanessa and I are hosting a dinner party next Saturday for some hospital board members. We'd like you to come. No mention of my health concerns. No follow-up from our earlier conversation. Dr. Peterson wants me to have an MRI, I said instead of answering. A pause. What for? The symptoms I mentioned. He's concerned about. Peterson's always been overcautious. But sure, get the MRI if it makes you feel better. So, Saturday at 7? Vanessa's having the car service pick you up at 6. As he rattled off details about the dinner, I caught a muffled exchange in the background. Is that her again? Vanessa's voice, slightly annoyed. Just confirming for Saturday, Michael replied, his hand presumably covering the phone. Then louder. Gotta run, Grandma. See you Saturday. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the calendar where I'd penciled in Michael Med School graduation, 15 years earlier. Next to it, a faded photograph of him in his cap and gown, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. You promised you'd take care of me, I whispered to his smiling image. What happened to us, Michael? The tingling in my arm intensified, a physical manifestation of the numbness growing between us. The dinner party gleamed with wealth and prestige. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier that hung over Michael and Vanessa's massive dining table. I sat near the end, beside a pharmaceutical representative who'd spent 15 minutes explaining why his company's pricing was actually quite reasonable. Considering the research costs, I'd barely touched my salmon. The tingling in my arm had progressed to a dull ache that radiated across my chest, and the room occasionally tilted when I moved my head too quickly. Across the table, Michael was deep in conversation with the hospital's chief of surgery. Vanessa, at the opposite end, laughed too loudly at something another guest said. Neither had spoken more than a few sentences to me all evening. "Eleanor, wasn't Michael just the most serious little boy?" Dr. Abernathy asked, breaking into my thoughts. "He tells us you practically raised him single-handedly." "After my daughter and son-in-law died," I nodded. "He was 7. And you put him through medical school? On a teacher's salary? Remarkable." "I remortgaged my house," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Sold my retirement property on the lake." Dr. Abernathy's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a sacrifice." "He was worth every penny." I tried to lift my water glass, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. "He promised he'd take care of me when I got older." The glass slipped from my hand, water splashing across the imported tablecloth. Conversation halted as everyone turned to look. "I'm so sorry," I mumbled, trying to blot the spill with my napkin. But my left arm wouldn't move properly, and the room was spinning faster now. "Mom, are you okay?" Michael called from the head of the table, his voice echoing strangely. I tried to answer, but my words came out slurred. The last thing I saw was Vanessa's annoyed expression as I slid from my chair onto the polished hardwood floor. "For God's sake," I heard her say. "She always needs attention at the worst possible times." Darkness swallowed me then, but consciousness returned in fragments. The wail of an ambulance siren, the cold metal of a gurney beneath me, urgent voices using medical terminology I didn't understand, and through it all, Michael's voice, not comforting me, but issuing clinical orders to the EMTs as if I were any other patient. "Potential CVA, patient is 87, history of hypertension." In the emergency room, I drifted in and out of awareness. Bright lights, the scratch of a hospital gown, machines beeping in steady rhythm. Hours later, or was it minutes, I heard Michael's voice again, not from beside my bed, but from the hallway outside my room. "Left-sided weakness, but the CT shows a relatively small bleed. Cognitive function appears mostly intact." Vanessa's voice followed, lower, but clear enough. "So, what's the prognosis?" "She'll need rehabilitation, physical therapy, possibly occupational therapy." "For how long?" A pause. "Could be months, maybe longer." "Michael," Vanessa's voice sharpened, "we can't do this. Your conference schedule alone, not to mention my promotion. We've talked about this." I struggled to open my eyes, to call out, but my body refused to cooperate. "What are we going to do with her?" Michael asked, his voice heavy with resignation. "You know what we need to do. That place near Westfield looks good in the brochures, and it's far enough away." "Sunshine Haven," Michael said quietly. "I'll make the calls tomorrow." I lay perfectly still, tears sliding silently into my hair. In that moment, I realized the cruelest truth. My grandson had died years ago, replaced by this stranger who wore his face but not his heart. Sunshine Haven smelled of industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. My room, half of a shared space divided by a thin curtain, contained a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a window overlooking the parking lot. A far cry from the home I'd sacrificed to fund Michael's education. "You'll adjust, Mrs. Whitman," the intake nurse assured me, adjusting my pillow with brisk efficiency. "We have activities every afternoon. Bingo on Tuesdays." I'd been at Sunshine Haven for 3 weeks. Michael had visited once, the day he dropped me off. He'd promised to return the following weekend, but called to cancel, citing an emergency surgery. "I brought some paperwork," he said during that first visit, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "Just standard forms for your care and insurance." The new medication made my vision blur, the words on the pages swimming before me. "What exactly am I signing?" I asked, squinting at the documents. "Nothing important. Medical authorization so I can talk to your doctors. Insurance forms. Standard procedure." He placed a pen in my hand and guided it to the signature line. "The nurses need these on file." I signed where he indicated, too disoriented to read the small print, too trusting to question him. That evening, after he left, a candy striper delivered a small box to my room. "Your grandson asked me to give you this," she said, placing it on my nightstand. Inside was my old flip phone and charger with a note. Thought you might want this. Reception isn't great here, but you can try. Love, Michael. I tried calling him that night. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message he never returned. As weeks turned into months, I worked diligently with the physical therapists, determined to regain my independence. By the second month, I could walk short distances with a walker. By the third, I could dress myself, though buttons remained a challenge for my weakened left hand. It was during my 4th month at Sunshine Haven that I met Doris Morgan. I was in the common room, attempting to read a dog-eared romance novel despite the blaring television, when a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me, but could someone please turn down that infernal racket? Some of us are trying to read." The speaker was a thin woman with steel-gray hair cut in a precise bob. She sat ramrod straight in her wheelchair, a leather-bound book open on her lap. No one moved to adjust the volume. The woman sighed dramatically, wheeled herself to the television, and reduced the volume herself, ignoring the protests from 2 residents watching a game show. "Thank you," I said when she returned to her spot near me. "I didn't do it for you," she replied crisply. Then, after a pause, "But you're welcome. I'm Doris Morgan. Eleanor Whitman." She assessed me with shrewd eyes. "Stroke?" I nodded. "5 months ago. Heart failure," she said, gesturing to herself. "Plus arthritis that would make a saint curse. I was a corporate attorney for 40 years. Now I'm apparently only qualified to play bingo and watch reruns of Golden Girls." Her candor made me smile. "I was a teacher. Raised my grandson after his parents died. He's a neurosurgeon now." "And he put you in this place?" Doris raised an eyebrow. "Some gratitude." My smile faltered. "He's very busy." "Aren't we all?" she countered. "I still manage my stock portfolio from this hellhole. Being old doesn't make us useless." Over the following weeks, Doris introduced me to her small circle. Walter Brennan, a former systems engineer with a perpetual scowl and surprising wit, and Ruby Washington, an ex-nurse with bright eyes and a gift for getting extra desserts from the kitchen staff. "Welcome to the resistance," Ruby told me one afternoon as we sat in the garden. "We may be old, but we're not dead yet." I laughed, feeling something loosen in my chest, something that had been tight since the night I overheard Michael and Vanessa discussing me as a problem to be solved. "My grandson thinks I am," I said, surprising myself with the admission. Ruby patted my hand. Then it's time he learned otherwise, isn't it?" "Straighten your left arm," Lisa, the physical therapist, instructed. "Good. Now reach for the ball." I stretched toward the small rubber ball, my fingers trembling with effort. After 6 months of intensive therapy, I'd regained significant mobility, surpassing the doctor's expectations. "You're making remarkable progress, Eleanor," Lisa said as I grasped the ball. "Most patients your age with similar strokes don't recover this quickly. Most patients my age don't have as much motivation," I replied, thinking of the overheard conversation between Michael and Vanessa. Later, in the common room, I joined my newfound friends for afternoon coffee. Doris was reviewing financial statements, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Walter tinkered with his ancient tablet, while Ruby dealt playing cards for our daily game of hearts. "Michael called this morning," I announced, settling into my chair. "He's coming to visit on Saturday." "First time in what, 3 months?" Ruby asked, shuffling the deck with practiced hands. 4, I corrected. "He's been at conferences, and Vanessa's firm is expanding, so they've been traveling," Walter snorted. "My son uses the same excuses. Too busy to visit, never too busy for a Hawaiian vacation. I see the pictures on Facebook." "You can access Facebook?" I asked, surprised. He patted his tablet. "This old thing still works. Tommy gave it to me 3 Christmases ago so I could see pictures of the grandkids. Half the time he forgets to post any." "Walter was quite the technical genius," Doris explained. "Worked on early computer systems before most people had heard of them." "I wouldn't call myself a genius," Walter grumbled, but his eyes crinkled with pleasure at the compliment. Ruby dealt the cards. "So, Eleanor, what's your plan for the big visit?" "Plan? I'm just happy he's coming." The 3 exchanged glances. "What?" I asked. Doris set down her financial papers. "Eleanor, we've been talking. The way your grandson has treated you, it's not right. He's busy. His career is no excuse," Ruby interrupted firmly. "I worked hospital shifts for 40 years, raised 3 children on my own after my husband died. Never once did I dump my mother in a facility and forget about her." "What Ruby's trying to say," Walter added more gently, "is that we think You deserve better. And we think you know it too, Doris concluded. I stared at my cards, unable to meet their eyes. They were right, of course. The long stretches without visits or calls. The perfunctory 10-minute phone conversations when he did call. The way he'd casually mentioned last month that they were exploring options with my house, as if it were already his property. He's still my grandson, I said finally. The little boy I raised. That boy grew into a man who made choices, Ruby said, laying down her first card. Bad ones. What would you have me do? I'm stuck here. Doris leaned forward. Are you? The doctors say your recovery is exceptional. Your mind is sharp as ever. The only thing keeping you here is your grandson's control over your finances and medical decisions, which you gave him when you signed those papers, Walter added. My stomach twisted at the memory of those blurry documents I'd signed without reading. I trusted him, and he betrayed that trust, Ruby said bluntly. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked around at these three people who'd become my allies in this sterile place. Doris, with her legal mind. Walter with his technical skills, Ruby with her medical knowledge and fierce loyalty. I don't know, I admitted. What can I do? Doris smiled thinly. More than you think, Eleanor. More than anyone suspects. As our game progressed, I found myself sitting straighter, my resolve hardening with each card played. They were right. I'd spent my life as an educator, teaching children to stand up for themselves, to fight injustice, to speak truth to power. It was time I followed my own lessons. When Michael visits, I said as I played the winning card of the hand, I want to find out exactly what he's done with my house and my money. And how do you propose to do that? Doris asked. I met her gaze steadily. I'm his grandmother. I'll ask him directly. Walter chuckled. And if he lies? Then we move to plan B, I replied, surprising myself with my certainty. And I'll need all of your help. Michael arrived late on Saturday, his surgical scrubs exchanged for designer casual wear, his expression a practiced blend of concern and professional detachment. You're looking better, Grandma, he said, kissing my cheek. His cologne was expensive, unfamiliar. The physical therapy helps, I replied, when they don't cut my sessions. His smile faltered slightly. The insurance only covers so much. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. We sat in the small private meeting room I'd reserved for our visit, an institutional space with motivational posters and vinyl chairs. How's your house? I asked casually. Still enjoying Beacon Hill? It's good. Busy with renovations. Vanessa wants to redo the kitchen. And my house? How are those options you mentioned coming along? Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then set it face down on the table. Actually, we found a buyer. Good offer, well above market value. They're eager to close quickly. My heart stuttered. You're selling my house? Without consulting me? Grandma, we discussed this. The property taxes alone. It doesn't make sense to keep it empty. We never discussed selling. And it's still my house, Michael. He sighed, using the same patient tone he probably used with confused patients. The power of attorney you signed gives me authority to manage your assets. The money will go into a trust for your care. I want to see the documents, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. All of them. The power of attorney, the trust agreement, everything. They're at my office. I'll bring copies next time. And when will that be? Another 4 months from now? His jaw tightened. I'm trying to balance a lot, Grandma. My practice, hospital committees, Vanessa's career. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered it, turning slightly away from me. Sorry, I have to take this. It's the hospital. He stood and walked to the corner of the room. Dr. Whitman speaking. While he talked, I noticed his tablet sitting on the chair beside me, its screen illuminated with notifications. One caught my eye. An email from A. Peterson, Sunshine Haven Administrator, with the subject line, Eleanor Whitman Care Plan Adjustment. Michael's conversation continued, something about a patient's test results. Without allowing myself to think about it, I picked up the tablet. The device wasn't locked. Why would it be? He never imagined I'd look. With trembling fingers, I tapped the email notification. Dr. Whitman, it read, this confirms receipt of your request to adjust Eleanor Whitman's care plan to the basic package, effective next month. While we typically recommend maintaining the enhanced package for stroke recovery patients, especially those showing improvement, we will proceed as directed. Please sign and return the attached form to authorize this change. My vision blurred with tears as I quickly photographed the screen with the flip phone Ruby had shown me how to use. I scrolled quickly through his inbox, finding emails about my house sale, discussions with Vanessa about using my retirement funds to cover what he called temporary cash flow issues, and correspondence with lawyers about creating a more restrictive trust arrangement. I photographed as many screens as I could before Michael's call ended. I placed the tablet back on the chair just as he turned around. Sorry about that. Where were we? You were explaining why you're too busy to visit your grandmother, I said, my voice remarkably calm considering the storm inside me. He had the grace to look ashamed. Grandma, that's not fair. I'm trying my best. Are you? I gestured around the room. Is this your best? Putting me in a facility hours from Boston? Selling my home without my consent? Reducing my care plan to save money? His expression shifted from guilt to alarm. What are you talking about? How did you know about the care plan? Or the house? Or how you've been using my retirement money? I leaned forward. I may be old, Michael, but I'm not stupid. You don't understand the financial realities, he said, his voice hardening. The cost of keeping you here is a fraction of what I spent putting you through medical school, I finished. A debt you promised to repay by taking care of me when I got older. Michael stood abruptly. I think you're getting overexcited. Maybe we should continue this another time. When? In another 4 months? I'll come back when you're calmer. He gathered his things, avoiding my eyes. The medications sometimes affect your mood. I'll speak with your doctor about adjusting them. As he reached the door, I called after him. I remember everything, Michael. Every promise you made, every sacrifice I made for you. He paused, but didn't turn around. Goodbye, Grandma. I'll call you. After he left, I sat alone in the sterile room, clutching my flip phone with its photographic evidence. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from rage and determination. Ruby found me there 20 minutes later. Did you get what you needed? She asked. I nodded, showing her the phone. More than I wanted to. Good, she said, her eyes flashing with righteous anger on my behalf. Then it's time for phase 2. Let me get this straight, Doris said, reviewing the photos on my flip phone. He's selling your house, using your retirement funds, and cutting your therapy, all without your informed consent? We sat in Walter's room, our unofficial War Council headquarters. Walter had propped a handwritten, "Do not disturb medication adjustment" sign on his door to ensure privacy. And he forged my signature on the house listing agreement, I added, pointing to a document visible in one email. That's definitely not my handwriting. Ruby whistled low. That's not just unethical, it's illegal. The power of attorney complicates things, Doris cautioned. If it's comprehensive enough, it might give him broad authority over your assets. But I signed it while medicated, I reminded her. I was barely conscious after the stroke, which could make it contestable. Doris nodded thoughtfully. I practiced corporate law, not elder law, but I know people who specialize in this area. Walter, who had been quietly examining the photos, looked up. The evidence is compelling, but limited. These email snippets don't tell the whole story. What do you suggest? I asked. We need more. He tapped his ancient tablet. If I had access to his email account, I could help you gather comprehensive evidence. That feels like an invasion. I hesitated. More invasive than him selling your house without permission? Ruby asked pointedly. Besides, Doris added, we're not talking about publishing his personal correspondence. We're talking about protecting your rights and assets. I considered this. Even if we wanted to, how would we access his accounts? I don't have his passwords. Walter smiled for the first time since I'd met him. He left his tablet unlocked once. He might do it again. But he won't be back for months, I pointed out. Actually, Ruby interjected, I may have a solution for that. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket. My niece Sarah is a journalist for the Westfield Gazette. She's been wanting to do a feature on vibrant seniors at local care facilities. How does that help us? I asked. Sarah could interview you as part of her story. Your background is compelling. Teacher, raised grandson alone, he becomes successful neurosurgeon. Human interest gold, Ruby's eyes gleamed. And when she publishes it, Michael will see it, I finished, understanding dawning. His colleagues might see it too. And he'll feel compelled to visit, Doris concluded, to make sure you're not saying anything unflattering. Meanwhile, Walter added, I can show you how to access and save more information from his accounts if he brings his tablet again. I looked around at my 3 allies. Doris with her legal mind, Walter with his technical knowledge, Ruby with her connections and fierce loyalty. For the first time since my stroke, I felt something beyond anger and helplessness. I felt powerful. "There's something else we should consider," Doris said, her expression grave. "If we move forward with this, Michael may retaliate. He could transfer you to a worse facility, cut off your visitors, restrict your phone access." A chill ran through me at the thought. Can he do that? With medical power of attorney? Potentially, yes. We fell silent, the reality of our vulnerable positions settling over us. Finally, Ruby spoke. "Every revolution has risks, Eleanor. The question is, are you willing to take them?" I thought about Michael. Not the man who had abandoned me to this place, but the boy I had raised, the child who had crawled into my bed crying after nightmares about his parents' death, the teenager who had worked after school to save for college application fees, insisting on contributing despite my protests, the medical student who had promised to make me proud. Then I thought about the cold calculation in his voice as he discussed me with Vanessa in that hospital corridor. What are we going to do with her? My decision crystallized. "I'm willing," I said firmly. "But we need to be smart, strategic." Doris nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like a lawyer." "First," I continued, "we need to document my mental competence. Official evaluations that prove I'm capable of making my own decisions." "I can help with that," Ruby said. "I know which doctors here aren't in Michael's pocket." "Next, we need copies of all the documents I signed, especially the power of attorney." "I'll contact my colleague Patricia Levine," Doris offered. "She specializes in elder law and can request those documents officially." "And finally," I concluded, "we need a plan for financial independence. Michael controls my accounts, but he doesn't know about the safety deposit box at First National." 3 pairs of eyes widened. "What safety deposit box?" Walter asked. I smiled for the first time in months. "The one containing my husband's life insurance policy and 20 years of birthday and Christmas checks I never cashed. Not enough to buy back my house, but enough to fight for it." Ruby slapped her knee in delight. "Eleanor Whitman, you've been holding out on us." "A good teacher always keeps a few lessons in reserve," I replied, feeling a spark of my old self returning. The woman who had faced widowhood, raised a child alone, and built a career despite countless obstacles. "So, we're really doing this?" Walter confirmed, his usual gruffness softened by something like hope. I nodded, my resolve hardening. "Michael taught me an important lesson by putting me here. He taught me that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest." I looked each of my friends in the eye. Now it's my turn to teach him something about consequences. Sarah Jenkins from the Westfield Gazette arrived on a Tuesday morning, her press badge hanging from a lanyard, her smile genuine as she shook my hand. "Mrs. Whitman, thank you for agreeing to this interview," she said, setting up a small recorder. "Aunt Ruby speaks very highly of you." "Ruby exaggerates," I replied, smoothing my best cardigan, the one I'd asked the aide to iron for this occasion. "I'm just an old teacher with a fairly ordinary life." Sarah's eyes twinkled. "Putting your grandson through medical school single-handedly hardly seems ordinary." We sat in the garden, autumn leaves drifting around us as I shared carefully selected stories. Michael as a grieving child, my years teaching while raising him, the pride I felt when he graduated medical school. "You mortgaged your home to pay his tuition?" Sarah confirmed, her pencil poised over her notepad. "The entire amount," I nodded. "Over $300,000 with interest, but it was worth every penny to help him achieve his dream. And now he's a successful neurosurgeon at Boston Memorial. That must be gratifying." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Success can change people in unexpected ways." Sarah tilted her head. "How so?" "Sometimes, when people achieve great things, they forget the shoulders they stood on to reach those heights." Her pencil stilled. "Mrs. Whitman, are you saying your grandson has forgotten your sacrifices?" I met her gaze steadily. "I'm saying that the true measure of a person isn't their professional success, but how they treat those who can no longer do anything for them." Sarah glanced at her recorder, then switched it off. "This conversation just got more interesting. Off the record, is everything okay between you and Dr. Whitman?" The concern in her voice nearly undid me. When was the last time someone had asked about my welfare with genuine interest? "Between us," I said softly, "I suffered a stroke at Michael's house 9 months ago. He had me transferred here within days. He's visited once." Sarah's expression darkened. "And this facility is 2 hours from Boston, far enough that visits are inconvenient. I see, she made a note in her pad. Made a note. And the house you mortgaged for his education? Being sold without my knowledge or consent. Sarah's professional demeanor slipped momentarily. Forgive me, that's appalling. It's complicated, I acknowledged. Legally, he may have the right. I signed documents after my stroke when I was heavily medicated. Mrs. Whitman, Sarah said, leaning forward. Would you be willing to tell this story? The full story? I hesitated. I don't want to destroy Michael's reputation. What about a story that doesn't name him directly? A piece about elder financial abuse using your experience as a central example without identifying your grandson specifically? That might work, I said slowly. If it could help others in my situation. Exactly. Sarah's eyes lit up with journalistic fire. This isn't about revenge. It's about awareness, about justice. 2 weeks later, Sarah's article appeared on the front page of the Westfield Gazette's Sunday edition, The Price of Devotion, When Family Caregivers Become Financial Predators. The piece detailed my decades of sacrifice, the stroke and the subsequent betrayal, all without naming Michael directly. It concluded with resources for elders facing similar situations and a quote from Patricia Levine, Doris's lawyer friend, about the rise in elder financial abuse cases. By Monday afternoon, the article had been picked up by a medical ethics blog. By Tuesday, it was trending on several social media platforms. On Wednesday, Michael called. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Hello, Michael. It's been weeks since I've heard from you. Don't play innocent. That article, people at the hospital are talking. They think it's about me. Is it?" I asked mildly. A pause. "I'm coming to see you tomorrow. We need to discuss this in person." After he hung up, I called Ruby immediately. "He took the bait," I told her. "He's coming tomorrow." "Perfect," she replied. "I'll alert the others. Operation Dignity is a go." That night, I couldn't sleep. Was I doing the right thing? Was this justice or revenge? The line seemed increasingly blurred. I remembered the last time I'd seen my daughter alive, how she'd hugged Michael goodbye before leaving for the trip that would end in tragedy. "Take care of Grandma if anything happens to us," she'd told him. Not seriously expecting the worst, but instilling the value nonetheless. "I promise," 7-year-old Michael had replied solemnly. Promises made, promises broken. The story of our lives, written in the invisible ink of expectation and disappointment. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, one that I would write myself, in ink that could never be erased. Michael arrived precisely at 10 a.m., his face a mask of professional composure that did nothing to hide the tension in his shoulders. He found me in the common room, playing cards with Walter, while Ruby and Doris pretended to read nearby. "Grandma, we need to talk." Privately? I laid down my cards. "These are my friends, Michael. Anything you need to say can be said in front of them." His jaw tightened. "This is a family matter. And since you're my only family who bothers to show up, that makes this quick work." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Sit. Talk." He remained standing. "That article is causing problems for me. My colleagues, the hospital board, people are making connections." "To what?" I asked innocently. "The article didn't name anyone. Don't be naive. It's specific enough that anyone who knows me can figure it out." He lowered his voice. "Is this about money? Because if it is, it's about respect," I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "And honesty. 2 things I thought I taught you." Michael glanced at my friends, clearly uncomfortable with witnesses. "Look, I've made an appointment with Dr. Singh to evaluate your medication. I think your current regimen is affecting your judgment." Walter snorted loudly. Michael shot him a glare before continuing. "I'm also considering whether Sunshine Haven is the right facility for your needs." "Is that a threat?" Ruby asked sharply. Michael ignored her, focusing on me. "I've only ever wanted what's best for you, Grandma. But this behavior, collaborating with journalists, making implications about my character, it suggests your condition might be worse than we thought." "My condition," I repeated slowly, "is that I'm tired of being treated like an inconvenient obligation." His expression hardened. "I have responsibilities, a career, a marriage, all made possible by my sacrifices," I finished for him. "Sacrifices you promised to honor by taking care of me when I needed you." Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or just annoyance at being challenged. He reached into his jacket and withdrew his tablet. "I want to show you something." He tapped the screen, then turned it toward me. These are your medical records, the cognitive assessments after your stroke. They indicate significant impairment in judgment and decision-making. I studied the document, noting the date, 3 days after my stroke, when I was heavily sedated and barely conscious. Interesting timing on that assessment, Doris remarked, abandoning any pretense of not listening. Was Mrs. Whitman even fully conscious then? Michael's head snapped toward her. Excuse me, but who are you? Doris Morgan, former senior partner at Lieberman & Associates. She extended her hand with perfect professional courtesy. I specialized in corporate fraud cases for 40 years. Michael ignored her hand. This is a private medical discussion. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. I believe it's become a legal one. We all turned to see a tall woman in a crisp suit entering the room, briefcase in hand. Patricia Levine, she announced, striding forward to hand Michael a business card. Elder law specialist. I've been retained to represent Eleanor Whitman. Michael stared at the card. This is ridiculous. I'm her medical proxy and power of attorney. About that, Patricia replied, opening her briefcase to extract a folder. I've filed a petition to revoke both, on grounds that they were obtained while Mrs. Whitman was medically incapacitated and without proper witnesses or disclosure of terms. The blood drained from Michael's face. You can't do that. I already have. Patricia handed him a document. This is your copy of the court filing. You'll also find a temporary restraining order preventing any changes to Mrs. Whitman's current assets or living arrangements pending a hearing. Michael's tablet slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the table. I reached for it casually, as if to prevent it from falling further. You've also been formally reported to the Massachusetts Medical Board for potential ethics violations, Patricia continued, her voice professionally neutral. Specifically regarding using your position as a physician to influence financial decisions for a family member without proper disclosure or consent. This is insane, Michael sputtered, his composure finally cracking. Grandma, tell them this isn't what you want. I looked at my grandson, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, the stranger he now was to me. For a moment, I saw the frightened 7-year-old who'd lost his parents, superimposed over the arrogant surgeon who'd abandoned me when I needed him most. What I want, I said quietly, is what I've earned. Respect, dignity, and the right to control my own life, for whatever time I have left. Michael's face contorted with a complex mixture of emotions, anger, disbelief, and something that might have been shame. Fine, he said finally. Have it your way. But don't expect me to keep paying for this place when you've turned against me. Oh, I won't need your money, I replied, turning his tablet around to show the screen. Not my medical records, but his email inbox, now open after I'd entered the password I'd watched him type during his previous visit. I have access to my own accounts again, and evidence of exactly how you've been managing them. For the first time in my life, I saw my grandson speechless. The look of utter shock on his face would have been comical under different circumstances. You should go now, Michael, I said gently. Your lawyer will be hearing from mine very soon. As he backed toward the door, Patricia added, and Dr. Whitman, I'd advise against making any significant financial transactions in the immediate future. The court tends to frown on that once proceedings have begun. After he left, the room erupted in quiet celebration. Walter patted my shoulder awkwardly. Ruby squeezed my hand. Doris nodded with professional approval. But beneath the triumph, my heart ached. In winning this battle, I had likely lost my only family forever. Are you okay? Ruby asked softly, noticing my expression. I did what I had to do, I replied. The rest remains to be seen. The hearing took place 4 months later in a wood-paneled courtroom in Springfield. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Patricia, my back straight despite the dull ache that had become my constant companion. All rise, the bailiff called as the judge entered, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes. Michael sat at the defense table with his attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit. He hadn't looked at me once since entering the courtroom. The gallery behind us was surprisingly full. Ruby, Doris, and Walter occupied the front row. Behind them sat Janet, the social worker from Sunshine Haven, who had provided key testimony about my mental competence. Sarah Jenkins from the Westfield Gazette was there too, notebook in hand, though this was officially a closed hearing. Most surprising was the presence of Vanessa in the last row, sitting alone, her expression unreadable. This court is now in session, Judge Harmon announced. Whitman versus Whitman, petition to revoke power of attorney and request for financial accounting. What followed was 3 hours of detailed testimony. Patricia presented evidence of my mental competence, including recent evaluations from 3 separate neurologists. She demonstrated the suspicious timing of the power of attorney signing, just hours after I'd received a significant increase in pain medication. Most damaging was the financial evidence. Bank statements showing transfers from my accounts to cover what appeared to be Michael and Vanessa's personal expenses. Emails discussing how to structure the sale of my house to maximize their benefit, and documented instances where Michael had overruled medical recommendations for my care to reduce costs. Michael's attorney argued that all actions were within the legal bounds of the power of attorney and were made with my best interests in mind. Dr. Whitman is a respected medical professional who understands his grandmother's needs better than she does herself, he insisted. These financial decisions were necessary to ensure her long-term care. When it was my turn to testify, I made my way slowly to the witness stand, refusing the offered wheelchair. I wanted the judge to see me standing on my own 2 feet. Mrs. Whitman, Patricia began, could you explain to the court your understanding of the documents you signed after your stroke? I had no understanding, I replied clearly. I was heavily medicated. Michael told me they were standard forms for my medical care. He never mentioned they would give him control over my house or finances. And if you had understood, would you have signed them? Absolutely not, I stated firmly. I raised Michael after his parents died. I sacrificed my retirement and mortgaged my home to put him through medical school. I did this willingly, out of love, but I never intended to surrender control of my life to anyone, not even him. During cross-examination, Michael's attorney tried to paint me as confused and resentful. Isn't it true that you've been angry with your grandson for abandoning you, as you perceive it? He asked. I've been disappointed, I corrected. There's a difference. And this legal action? Isn't it really about punishing Dr. Whitman for not visiting as often as you'd like? I met the attorney's gaze steadily. This action is about justice, about honoring promises made. Michael promised to care for me as I aged. Instead, he treated me as a burden to be managed from a distance. The attorney's expression hardened. So this is about revenge. I shook my head. No, it's about remembering who we are and what we owe each other. Michael seems to have forgotten both. When Michael took the stand, he spoke of the financial pressures of maintaining my care, the difficult decisions he'd had to make as my condition deteriorated. Everything I did was for her benefit, he insisted. The house was sitting empty, costing money in taxes and maintenance. The sale proceeds were intended for her care fund. Yet the documents show you used some of those proceeds to pay off personal debts, Patricia pointed out during cross-examination. Temporary allocations, Michael responded stiffly. I intended to repay those amounts. Like your grandmother, intended to be repaid for financing your medical education? Patricia asked. Judge Harmon intervened before he could answer. The court will take a 15-minute recess before closing arguments. During the break, I stepped into the hallway for air, leaning heavily on my cane. To my surprise, Vanessa approached me. Mrs. Whitman, she said, her voice low, I want you to know I had no idea about some of what Michael was doing. The house sale, yes, but not the other financial arrangements. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. What changed, Vanessa? You were quite eager to have me placed in Sunshine Haven. She looked away. The medical board investigation. It could ruin his career, our lives. And for what? Her eyes met mine again. Was it worth it destroying your grandson like this? The question hung between us, heavy with accusation and fear. I didn't destroy Michael, I replied finally. He did that himself, one broken promise at a time. As Vanessa walked away, I wondered if Michael had sent her to appeal to my sympathies. If so, he'd miscalculated badly. Back in the courtroom, Judge Harmon listened to closing arguments with an impassive expression. When both sides had finished, she spoke directly to me. Mrs. Whitman, regardless of my ruling, I want to acknowledge your courage in bringing this case forward. Elder financial abuse often goes unreported because victims fear exactly the kind of family rupture you're experiencing now. She turned to Michael. Dr. Whitman, your professional achievements are commendable, but they do not exempt you from ethical obligations to your family members. The judge shuffled her papers, then delivered her ruling. The power of attorney was revoked immediately. Control of my remaining assets would be returned to me, and Michael would be required to provide a full accounting of all transactions made using my funds, with any personal use to be repaid with interest. Furthermore, she concluded, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation regarding the unauthorized signature on the house sale documents. This court is adjourned. As people began to file out, I remained seated, suddenly exhausted. The victory felt hollow. I had won my freedom and financial independence, but at what cost? Michael passed my table without a glance, his shoulders rigid with humiliation and anger. Michael, I called softly. He paused, but didn't turn. I never wanted this, I said. I just wanted you to remember who you are, who we were to each other. For a moment, I thought he might respond. Instead, he continued walking, disappearing through the courtroom doors and, perhaps from my life forever. Ruby appeared at my side, her warm hand covering mine. You did what needed to be done, Eleanor. No matter what happens next, remember that. I nodded, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. Not for the money or the house or even the betrayal, but for the little boy I had loved, who somewhere along the way had forgotten how to love me back. 1 year after the court hearing, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment in a senior living community in Cambridge, watching autumn leaves dance across the courtyard. The community was everything Sunshine Haven wasn't: bright, engaging, respectful of its residents' autonomy. Ruby lived 3 doors down, having moved here shortly after I did. Walter and Doris remained at Sunshine Haven, but visited regularly, Walter grumbling good-naturedly about the taxi fare. The proceeds from my house sale, returned to me after the court order, had been enough to secure this comfortable apartment and establish a modest trust for my ongoing care, managed by a court-appointed fiduciary. Not luxury, but dignity. It was enough. Mail's here, Ruby announced, entering with a small stack of envelopes, including something from Boston Memorial. My heart quickened as I accepted the letter. It had been 6 months since I'd had any contact with Michael. After the hearing, the medical board had placed him on probation and required him to complete an ethics program. The district attorney had ultimately declined to pursue criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence of intent to defraud. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was not a letter, but a brochure for the hospital's new community care initiative, providing specialized neurological services to underserved populations. A yellow sticky note was attached in Michael's handwriting. First patients next week. Thought you might want to know. What is it? Ruby asked, noting my expression. A beginning, perhaps, I replied, showing her the brochure. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. The landline I'd insisted on having, despite Ruby's teasing about my technological resistance. Grandma? Michael's voice was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. It's me. Hello, Michael, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I received the brochure. I'm starting there next Thursday, 1 day a week for now, alongside my regular practice. Community medicine. That was your original plan, wasn't it? Before the fellowships and specializations. A pause. You remember that? I remember everything, I said simply. Another pause, longer this time. I've been thinking a lot about what you said in court, about remembering who we are to each other. I waited, allowing him the space to continue. The ethics program made me confront some uncomfortable truths, he continued, about how I've changed, about the choices I've made, and I'm trying to do better. His voice cracked slightly. Vanessa and I are separated, have been since the hearing. The divorce will be final next month. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Don't be. It's been clarifying. Made me realize how much I'd let her influence my priorities. He took a deep breath. Grandma, I know I can't undo what I did, but I'd like to see you, if you're willing. The request hung between us, weighted with years of disappointment and betrayal. Thursday is my book club, I said finally, but I'm free for lunch on Friday. 3 days later, Michael arrived at precisely noon, looking both familiar and strange. The same face, but somehow softer, less certain. He'd brought sandwiches from the deli we used to visit near my old house. You remembered, I said, accepting the paper-wrapped package. Turkey on rye, extra pickles, no mayo. He attempted a smile. Some things stay with you. We ate at my small kitchen table, the conversation stilted but civil. He told me about the community clinic, about patients he'd already screened for the program. I shared stories about Ruby's latest hobby, watercolor painting, and Walter's ongoing battle with the Sunshine Haven administration over internet access. As he prepared to leave, Michael paused at the door. "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small key. "It's to the safe deposit box, your safe deposit box. I never accessed it, but the bank sent the renewal notice to my address." I accepted the key, our fingers briefly touching. "Thank you. There's something else." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket. "It's not much, but it's a start." Inside was a check, the first repayment of the money he'd diverted from my accounts. "Michael, please," he interrupted. "Let me do this. Not because the court ordered it, but because it's right." I studied his face, searching for the grandson I'd raised. For the first time in years, I caught a glimpse of him, in the uncertainty of his posture, the absence of arrogance in his eyes. "Will you come again?" I asked. "If you'll let me." "Next Friday, same time," I said. "Bring those cookies from Baker's Square, the chocolate ones with walnuts." His smile was tentative but real. I remember. After he left, I joined Ruby in the community room where she was setting up her easel. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's a beginning," I replied, watching through the window as Michael walked to his car. "Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. After everything he did, you're giving him another chance?" Ruby's tone held no judgment, only curiosity. I considered the question carefully, thinking of the boy who had become a man, who had become a stranger, who was now trying to find his way back. "I'm not doing it for him," I said finally. "I'm doing it for me, for the teacher who spent her life believing people can learn and change, for the grandmother who never stopped loving her grandson, even when he forgot how to love her back." Ruby squeezed my hand. "That's the Eleanor I know." As I watched Michael drive away, I remembered something I used to tell my students when they struggled with difficult lessons. The greatest gift a teacher can give is not knowledge, but the chance to try again after failure. Michael had failed himself as much as me. But in that failure, perhaps he'd finally learned the lesson I'd tried to teach him all along, that true success isn't measured in titles or bank accounts, but in how we honor the promises we make to those who sacrificed for us. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined for us, but then, the best stories rarely end as we expect. They simply continue, one page turning to the next, offering new chapters we never anticipated. And this chapter, imperfect as it was, felt like one worth reading. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.